Hello, welcome to the Clan Blue podcast. My name is Dan Rolinson. I'm joined here this evening by Frankie Maguire. It threw me a little bit then because I've got AirPods in for change and I can normally hear myself, but I can't. So hopefully my mic is on and working and everything sounds okay. I'm well. Frankie, are you well?
I'm feeling very well now. I wasn't feeling too well after the Christmas break when I never want to see alcohol ever again in my life. A little bit too much drunk. Yeah, I'm feeling very well now that Aston Villa got a late winner in that game. I wasn't feeling great for about 87 minutes. And then Matty Cash pops up with a Roberto Carlos style deflection with that curve on the ball. But I was loving it. Throwback to Grealish. But exactly what we needed.
Yeah, obviously, this podcast could have a very different mood if that Matty Cash goal hadn't gone in and we were talking about a 0-0 and a replay, God forbid, Christ. Matty Cash's late 87th minute, I think it was, deflected winner seals the deal for Aston Villa, gets them into the fourth round for the first time in 8 years, which is ridiculous, really. Not got past the third round in 8 seasons. And the one before that, we got to the fourth round. Man City beat us 4-0. The one before that, we got all the way to the final. So maybe this is the year that we go all the way to the final again. Who knows? Even everyone who's watching it along live, King81 says, I am here. Let's begin. We have begun now. Thank you for joining us. Richard says, listening live for the first time. You guys do a great job up the Villa. Thank you, Richard, for joining us live for the first time. Liam says, terribly boring first half, but good to see Kamara back and Ramsey look good. We'll talk about those two in a little bit. Fred says, there is life after the third round. Yeah, absolutely. Who knew? And Rachel, evening all, professional performance, just getting the job done. And that is, I think, the overarching message from me for this podcast. Job done, into the hat for the next round, all those kind of cliches. I'm not too bothered about the performance not being the best and it being a little bit boring for us. And me and John did an episode in the week about like how important is the FA Cup, just to be past the third round and get to the fourth round and see who comes next is not the achievement, but for Villa who haven't done it for 8 seasons, just to be involved in the next round of the draw feels like a little tick in the box for Emery, a little win for us.
Oh, Professor Unai, as I call him, he truly is a miracle worker. It feels like the amount of hoodoos that he has ended. Even in the first game he managed us when he beat Manchester United 3-1 at home for the first time in 27 years.
Even he lost to Stevenage, though.
I know, exactly, yeah. So even he's experienced this terrible curse. So finally winning a game in the FA Cup for the first time since dinosaurs walked the earth is an extremely nice feeling, I must say. Look, I mean, it's an interesting game in that I think Middlesbrough were very well coached. I think Michael Carrick's done a very good job there. He did well last season. At the start of the season, they lost a lot of their key loan players, Cameron Archer, Aaron Ramsey. Akpom, I think, went to Ajax as well. So they started quite badly, but they've sort of got their act together again recently. But they do have a lot of injuries. And obviously, they also have the big EFL Cup, Chelsea game coming up, the same game this week. So I thought Middlesbrough was set up tactically very, very smart. He's obviously studied Forest, Sheffield United, how they played Villa, deep block. And it was basically a 5-2-3. So in the middle, it just felt like Kamara and Dendoncker were slightly crammed in. And there weren't really options to play to. That said, I thought Kamara was absolutely fantastic and showed exactly why we missed him for the 3 games he was suspended.
Yeah.
But we're always having to go out wide. And, with those 2 wingers, I think they were just 2 fullbacks, hybrid wingers. What they're hoping for is get a break. One of them gets forward, whip a ball into the box, and they almost did it in the first half. So they were well coached. But with Villa, it just felt a little bit like we were, it reminded me a little bit of Spain as an international team. It's like, lots of possession, but sometimes maybe just struggle to break down a low block. And that's something that Villa, it's a huge compliment to us and shows exactly where we are now, that teams respect us that much. They feel they have to play like that against us. But it also means that this is something that's going to be interesting to watch how Emery and the coaches adapt to this now in the second half of the season, and also in the upcoming transfer windows as well, with what type of profile of player does he think might help us in breaking these low blocks.
Yeah, absolutely spot on. I think you see that when Villa play against somebody who are willing to come out against them and play as well, we can be devastating on the counter-attack, play from back to front in a matter of literally seconds. And that's kind of peak Unai Emery, isn't it? We saw that the goal against Arsenal is probably the great example of that, to play through pretty much every player and create a chance for ourselves and score and win by 1 goal. And you think, oh, yeah, it wasn't the most swashbuckling performance ever, but in that moment, that was Emery ball in and of itself. when we're set up against a Nottingham Forest or a Sheffield United at home, or a Burnley even to a certain extent, who are willing to kind of sit in a little bit and be happy with a point at Villa, and that'd be a good result for them. Middlesbrough getting a replay would be a good result for them. Yes, they got to go to Villa Park in the second leg, but it still gives them the chance. Or maybe they nick it 1-0 tonight and go on into the fourth round instead, and Villa have like a little banana skin. So it's how does Emery and his team break that down? Teams will know that if we play against Villa, they'll hurt us because they can do that. They can do it to anybody. They can do it to Man City. If they can do it to them, they can do it to anybody. So when teams know, if we just sit in and be happy to kind of let them play in front of us and defend well and be well kind of regimented, we might get something against Villa. And it's on Unai Emery and his team now to work out, okay, well, when sides do that, and there will be a lot of them that do it because it will be one of the ways they can get something against us. You're probably talking, half the Premier League might try that and just think, okay, we'll just sit in against Villa because they don't really know what to do. That'll be on them to work out how to get past that. And at the moment, it doesn't really feel like we can do it. I text you during the game with a couple of not notes, but Conser did well there, and I'll kind of refresh my memory. And it's kind of just we've had a couple of chances. We've been okay here. We haven't played badly. We're not, we were deserving of the win in terms of the chances we created, but we're not kind of the usual Aston Villa that we tend to see, and that is proving to be a little bit tricky for us every so often. And there will be games we come unstuck and don't get through. But now, like I said, I'm not going to delve too much into the performance for the FA Cup. It's just get through to the next round, You're one game closer to Wembley. But does that concern you a little bit, Villa's kind of inability to break these teams down when they have to?
Slightly, yeah. I'm going to Sheffield United away at the start of February with a Sheffield United friend of mine, and I'm already can envision what this game is going to be like again. They'll sit deep, try and hit us on the break, all that. Like I say, it does slightly remind me a bit of the Spanish international team at times. It's fantastic, possession-based side, but teams now just always sit deep against them. And I think with Villa, today, it's probably not a coincidence that we should have had a penalty when Moreno got the ball in the box. That came from a quick interchange from him and Ramsey. And I think at times the interchanges weren't quite quick enough. And I think as well, we started the game without probably our best technical player in Douglas Luiz in the centre. Ollie Watkins wasn't there to lay it into. Diaby was on the bench as well. So, the corner that led to the goal came from Douglas Luiz whipping the ball quickly into bypassing all of the midfield straight into the feet of Diaby, who'd come deep, turned, led to the corner, into the box it goes, and Matty Cash has taken a shot from distance. And sometimes I do wonder if we could shoot from distance a little more. We had one or two of those today. Duran nearly scored, or McGinn, it was a brilliant save from the Middlesbrough keeper. I think Cash had another shot that took a deflection and got saved. And then, sometimes it is just do that every now and again. I think we could have done that a bit more against Sheffield United. It is slightly concerning that we look a little bit predictable against these low blocks. But by the same token, I think we have to remember we're a year into Emery's reign now. It's an evolutionary process. Now, this is a new challenge that's been presented to Villa, probably on a more regular basis. And we're going to see this more regularly in the second half of the season. And as I say, I'm intrigued to see how Villa, how we adapt to this, whether some of our players maybe change their game a bit. Maybe a Ramsey changes a little bit. He can't, maybe he's not going to have as much space to run into now. He's going to have to adapt to that. And then, maybe we work out, in the final third, whipping the ball into the feet of a striker, a quick layoff here, and just a bit different movement of some kind. So, and also in transfer windows, what profile of player Emery thinks we need to, on a more regular basis, break these low blocks.
Yeah, I mean, it's an obvious shout because it's somebody who's not missing, and we tend to kind of look to players that are missing and go, they're the answer. But someone like Emi Buendia tonight and against Sheffield United or Nottingham Forest, just to sit in those pockets and unlock defences is exactly the kind of profile you'd be after. Yeah. So, the sooner he comes back, the better to fixing this individual problem if we don't go and recruit somebody. Just on those three games that we mentioned a few times now, Forest, obviously tonight, and Sheffield United as teams that we've had to play in front of for a lot of the game and have a lot of the ball but struggle to break them down. I do wonder how the game pans out if Villa score earlier and the opposition have to come out to try and get back into something. Obviously, we don't score at Forest. We score a very late equaliser against Sheffield United in the 95th, 96th minute or something. Tonight is obviously a very last-minute goal as well. if those goals against these kind of teams come in the 15th minute or the 20th minute, do they then have to come out and then Villa grow into the game even further and win 2-0, 3-0 and look more comfortable? The fact that it's 0-0 for so long, or Villa are behind themselves relatively early in that Forest game, kind of sets you up to go, oh, we've really got a job on our hands now to get back into this, because they're happy just to sit there because they're either defending the lead or defending the 0-0 and the point.
Yeah,
I do wonder how it would look if Villa score earlier in games. And we've seen them do that before last season. There was the graphic, wasn't there, of Sky Sports, so goals in the first 15 minutes. I think Villa were top. We've got to get back to that, especially against these sides that are happy to sit in, because goals change games. And to get them early will affect how these opponents play against us.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. I mean, I think that's one of the things from last season that I wish we'd sort of carried on into this year, is that we aren't quite getting those early goals away from home just yet. But like I say, adaptation, and I think a few players might have to adapt their game a little bit. I'm looking a bit at Ramsey, but as I say, another positive today I thought on the left-hand side, it was great to see Moreno back, and I thought there were a couple of times he showed he's getting back to form quite quickly from that long-term injury he had. Ramsey, obviously, he's probably playing a lot more than we ideally would have wanted, probably due to the injury to Tielemans. I think he's a player you would have wanted to bring in just a little bit, half an hour here, 45 there, and 90 there. Instead, he's playing 90 minutes all the time. So, he's not looked massively on form recently, but like I say, he's coming back from a long injury, and maybe I think just needs a goal and we'll get back to it. But also, like I say, it's going to be interesting to see how he adapts as a player if we continue to come up against low blocks.
Yeah, 100%. I said earlier that me and John did a podcast. It was part of our Q&A that we recorded in the week, but I clipped it out as a separate video because the Q&A was like an hour and 20 minutes long, and I thought it was a good chat that would have been lost in that Q&A. And I separated it out as its own little upload that people can go back and see if they want to. It's still relevant despite us winning this evening. Like, kind of how important is the FA Cup to Villa this year? When we went out of the Carabao Cup in September or whenever it was after Everton, I was gutted about that. I still am, to be honest. I still thought that was a good opportunity to go far in a competition. But back then, it's kind of like, it's early in the season. Like, what are our priorities this season? The Carabao Cup is a genuine chance at silverware. Obviously, the FA Cup is as well, but the route to the final looked easier for the Carabao Cup for some reason. Now you fast forward to January and we're second in the Premier League. You can see why the Premier League is now our priority. Finishing in the top four would be massive for us to open up revenue streams and yada yada yada. I've said my piece on it a lot. That's not to say I didn't want to win tonight. I thought, let's lose and I won't be bothered. I'll forget the FA Cup. Of course, it's hugely important. I want us to win every game we play, no matter what. When I do my score predictions, I think I back Villa to win every single game, whoever the opponent is. So obviously I'm buzzing to get through to the fourth round. I hope we play somebody relatively comfortable and we get to the fifth round and all the way through to Wembley and lift the trophy. Of course I do. But you can see why you look at the Premier League and think, well, if the fixtures start piling up, is the FA Cup a distraction? All those kind of things. Not that I particularly agree with that. And we take our eye off the ball in the Premier League. Yes, we could get to the FA Cup semi-final and narrowly miss out, and it'd be really devastating. But if that also comes at the cost of dropping down to 7th in the Premier League, that's not really where anyone thought we'd be. So we kind of said our piece on it on this video that I've referenced. So I'm not going to go through it all again. If you want to see what me and John thought about it, go back and listen. What's your take on it? How much importance do you put on an FA Cup run for Villa?
I think obviously the priority is the Premier League. Because I think, as you say, like if we can get Champions League spot for next season, as you say, the revenue streams that opens up, what that can do for us, what it says about Aston Villa as a club, the sort of tournaments that we are associated with, and therefore the players we can attract. I know it's a sort of cynical way of looking at it when you talk about revenue streams and things like that, but that is the truth, and therefore, in the long term, that would help Aston Villa be even more competitive because we'd be able to attract the best players, be able to have deeper squads, and therefore, in the long term, help us to go further in the FA Cup next season or the season after. Yeah. I think for me, the FA Cup, it's lost a little bit the luster it had when we were probably kids. I think, I feel like the FA Cup final was like such a major event. I think there's probably a few reasons to that. I think Man United pulling out of it in 2000 didn't help, and I slightly think the semi-finals being at Wembley doesn't help either. I kind of
I don't
wish,
like that.
I wish they were back at Villa Park and Old Trafford and places like that, because I think once you got to Wembley, it was like getting to the final boss in a computer game. M. Bison in Street Fighter or whatever like that. And good reference there. But yeah, I think so for me, I think the FA Cup is it is still a very special tournament. I think, though it doesn't feel like it has the glamour of the past. Still, I think if Aston Villa won it, it'd be absolutely enormous, wouldn't it? I think I'd go on a long walk to Australia to calm down because I'd be so overjoyed by it. It'd be a massive moment for Aston Villa. We haven't won that trophy in a long time, and it's something that all the big clubs take seriously, really. And that's something I think we should look at ourselves as a big club and someone who should take the FA Cup as serious as we can. Like I say, though, if we did get to the semi-final and then lost 3-0 to City and picked up an injury and it cost us the Champions League place, then that's frustrating. But I guess that's kind of a risk you have to take.
That's football, isn't it, I suppose.
Yeah. So I think, and again, a cup run can help with momentum as well sometimes. The good vibes you get off that run can also leak into the league as well. So I can see the arguments both ways on it. But for me, I still think the FA Cup is a very, very special trophy. And I think if we were to get to the final and even win it, then I'll tell you what, there's a statue going up of Unai Emery outside my flat. People live near me have to get used to walking around it, I think.
It'd be nice to be, massively obviously getting ahead of myself here, it'd be nice to be the most recent Midlands winner of a domestic trophy as well. Obviously, Leicester won it, not really a rival for us, but a Midlands club. Leicester won it a couple of years ago. I think it might have been the lockdown year, 2021 maybe. Yeah. Obviously, Blues won the League Cup in 2011, I think. Yeah. Which, they never mention it, do they? But it would be nice for us to win a trophy after 28, 29 years. Of course it would be. But I am of the mindset that I don't think you have to prioritise one or the other, really. But if you... Right, this is the way we'll settle this debate. Forget like prioritising competitions and distractions and all these kind of things. That's how I can offer you a red pill and a blue pill like the Matrix. Right. It's you can win the FA Cup, but you finish, let's even say 6th. Let's say the Europa League. So 6th place, Europa League football, and you win the FA Cup. Or you get to the quarterfinals of the FA Cup, but you finish in the top 4 and secure the Champions League. Which of those scenarios are you picking? Which pill are you taking?
That you are Morpheus to my Neo. Then that is a difficult. that is just.
It's hard. It is hard. It depends how you want to take that. I understand that, and again, this is obviously based on how much value you put on the competition. It's what age you are, what generation you are. There were people who have seen us win everything but the FA Cup and are probably thinking, I may not have many years left on this planet to see Villa win that trophy. So absolutely, I would prioritise winning that to say I've seen Villa win the lot. On the other side of the coin, you've got the argument that Champions League football gives Villa more money to spend. They can get better players. So probably years down the line, they'll have another crack at the FA Cup again, whereas this might be one of our best chances to get into the Champions League this year specifically. Yeah. However, when we spoke about this on Friday, some of the YouTube comments were like, well, Leicester got into the Champions League and then got relegated. Newcastle got in last season and are out in the group stage, and it's not really done anything for them, but it will continue to do something for them. So unless you're one of the Arsenals, Man Cities, Uniteds who are already up the top anyway, traditionally always at the top anyway, who are always in that competition, you don't want it to be like, okay, well, I've picked the Champions League option, but it was just for one season, and then we're not in it again for 10 years or whatever. Yeah. So I think if you are to get into it, you want to always be into it. So I can see why people would take the FA Cup as an option, because it's putting your name on the trophy, isn't it? It's a moment in history. But yeah, that's enough waffling for me. Which one are you picking?
No, I agree. I think, so one of my best memories in life comes from very early in my life, is when I went to the 1994 Coca-Cola Cup final, where Villa beat Man United 3-1. And that is just an unforgettable, incredible moment as an Aston Villa fan, particularly as the years have gone by and we've not won much since. So I think if we won an FA Cup, like the memories that would give to everybody would be utterly irreplaceable. It would just be so, so special. And then if we ended up in the Europa League as a consequence of it, instead of the Champions League, we've got Unai Emery. So I'm sort of thinking we might actually win the Europa League as well. But I think I'm going to just go a bit pragmatic and think about sort of the prestige of the club in the sense of if we got the Champions League. I think Villa can be competitive in the FA Cup for quite a long time. I think with the Champions League, I think we do need to experience that at Villa Park. I think that would be a really, really awesome experience for Villa. And I think it'd be a big moment for Villa to be like, all right, we actually can break through like Tottenham did 10 years ago. And who knows where that can lead us then. 10 years ago, people would have laughed at the idea Tottenham could ever reach a Champions League final. And they did it. And Aston Villa, there's no reason Villa couldn't dream of doing the same thing, if we can keep up our momentum for the next 5 or 6 years.
So and would Spurs, sorry to interrupt, would Spurs fans swap the 6 or 7 years they had in the Champions League and get into the final? Obviously, they've not won a trophy for donkey's years either. Would they swap those years of progression in replace of one trophy either? Probably not.
Yeah, and it, ultimately, what it could do for us, the prestige of the club, what it does for off the field kind of revenues. When you think of stuff like FFP, what it could do for when you attract players, and what it just says to what Aston Villa are as a sort of global team. I think I'd take the Champions League just because we've never had it sort of in recent history, or the current iteration of the Champions League. Obviously, we won the European Cup in the 80s, but so yeah, I think I'd take the Champions League, even though I fully acknowledge that the FA Cup winning that, the memories of that would be so special. But then again, memories of playing in the Champions League next year under the floodlights against Real Madrid at Villa Park, something like that, again, irreplaceable. So I think it's win-win either way, but it's a very difficult choice. But I think I'd just go Champions League just because we've not had that for a very long time. Yeah.
I think there's no wrong answer, really. I'm going to read a couple of comments before we move on to just some general other bits and pieces. Mr. Sensible says it will be so special to win the FA Cup.
It would.
Liam says, I'll take the FA Cup. And 6th, I want a trophy. I want to be a hypocrite. I will be a hypocrite, says Danny, and say top 4. It puts us on a different level as a club. Anthony, yes, the FA Cup is the last one I need to see us win. Exactly. That there will be a lot of people out there in that same position. King 81, FA Cup will be so special. Top 4 gives you money, but does it give you year on year success? Not guaranteed. Of course, definitely it isn't. M. Nadeem says, need Champions League football. FA Cup would be great, but it's time we got into Europe's elite teams at Villa Park. Yeah, that's kind of how I feel, to be honest, as well. And final one from James. The FA Cup is all that I have not seen Villa win, born 1958. So it's a must for me. Missed out by just 1 year. I suppose you wouldn't count it, would you, if you were alive, but you don't remember it.
Maybe if you saw Villa win the European Cup in the early 80s, maybe it is like literally a case of like, I want the FA Cup just because I've never seen it. So
exactly. Like we're talking about, we've not had the Champions League, obviously, but we've not had the European Cup for a long time. If you were born in the 50s or the 60s and you were in your youth for Villa winning the European Cup in 1982, you do look at the FA Cup as, it's the only one I've not experienced. So, of course, I want that. And I'm now into my 60s. My maths is terrible, but again, I'm not saying that. I said before about like, I haven't got many years left. Like people could go on a long time these days, but you're kind of thinking how maybe a different way to phrase that is, how many more opportunities will I get to physically go and see us in the final if we get there, due to the age I am now and all those different things. Don't be accused of being ageist or whatever. That probably is a word for it. Right, that's enough kind of general chit-chat, I think, about the FA Cup as a whole, rather than the Middlesbrough game. It was a very boring first half, wasn't it? I was worrying a little bit, what are we actually going to talk about here? But I think we've kind of got our way through it. Like I said, I thought we were good enough to have got past the tie. Like Middlesbrough didn't really create that much, to be honest. There was the Conser header that hit the post. Moreno had a decent chance from a corner just after. McGinn had that shot. Obviously, Cash has scored the deflected goal in the end. Duran had a decent chance early on as well. So there was moments there that Villa could have got that early goal that we talked about earlier and gone on to win more comfortably than 1-0 in the last minute. But ultimately, the job is done the same. We're into the hat for the 4th round. Just quickly on Duran as the other talking point I wanted to reference. Before I say anything, what do you make of what we've heard about Duran in the last couple of days, all the social media stuff, the AC Milan links coming off tonight and not really doing a great deal. What do you make of him?
I think Duran is a naturally very, very gifted player. I think he's got a very high ceiling if he is able to focus himself. And I think it's a shame the kind of noise that we're hearing, and various reports are saying about some tension between him and Emery, and it sounds like it's something to do with European ties and which has come off. There's obviously two sides to everything, and we don't really know precisely what the exact reasoning is if he is keen to go to AC Milan. But I think he is a player who's very talented. He's very young and very raw, and there is a reason Emery starts at Ollie Watkins, because Ollie Watkins is the finished article, isn't he? He's the perfect player that we have up front, and Duran at the moment isn't that. And he has to just be patient. He's 19, 20. It's going to come together for him soon if he's just willing to be patient. And I think it's unfortunate. It is a distraction. I think, whether it comes down to, the advice he gets around him, his youthful age. And so obviously sometimes we look back on the things we did when we were young and kind of regret it a bit. It's a bit of a shame that there does seem to be this noise. And I think it's detracting a bit from what a talent he actually is. And like I say, if he's just willing to be patient, he is getting game time, and he has scored a few goals this season, including that incredible goal against Palace. So I think if I was advising, I would say you're with a great manager and a great coach, a proven coach. This is a massive opportunity, and just see it through to the end of the season. Just work hard and just listen and to what the advice that's given from the coach and the manager, and see where it goes from there. And just keep, when you get your chance, score goals. That's basically it. And there's no guarantees if he went to somewhere like AC Milan that he'd even play that much. And I'm not saying he wouldn't do very well there. Maybe he would, but it just seems a bit of a risk to go when he's got this opportunity at Villa. And I think see it through to the end of the season, take it, because this is a big opportunity for him.
Yeah, we'll talk about Duran again in a second. But I've got to flash this comment up. It's still about would you take the FA Cup or the Champions League? But just by pure coincidence, I'm such a loser for pointing this out. This comment, by pure coincidence, is from John Duran. Spelled obviously totally differently, but how weird is that we've now moved on to John Duran? John Duran says, 17 in 1982, so I'd take the Champions League all day. It would improve our chances of winning the FA Cup in following seasons, and I'm not planning on dying just yet. John Duran, I'm pleased to hear that. Back to John Duran, though. As you said, there's been a lot of noise about this AC Milan potential move. Did you see the stuff today, or I saw it today at least anyway, about Instagram, like him removing Villa from his bio or something, and unfollowing the club, and then people saw that he'd refollowed the club, and all these things they are noise. Like, I don't know whether you read anything into that. He's 19. People talk about like an attitude problem and a falling out with Emery. John Townley has always insisted that there was no falling out between the manager and the player. Okay. But I think I would suspect some, I don't want to say attitude problem, but maybe like an immaturity to it because of his age, or so, something like that. I'm not quite settling in just yet because he's so inexperienced. Maybe something along those lines, more so than he's a bad egg. I don't think that is necessarily true. No. I think there is talent in there. I think there is ability, but it's so unrefined at this stage that you couldn't rely on him. That if Ollie Watkins was injured for even a month and Duran had to play every game for, he had to play 5 games in a row, how many goals would he score in the Premier League during that time? Obviously, it's impossible to say. It's not going to happen. But they'll also find themselves in this weird kind of Spurs Harry Kane situation that Ollie Watkins plays every single minute available, pretty much. Obviously, he didn't start tonight, but in the league and in the big games, Ollie Watkins is definitely starting up front, essentially on his own. Obviously, Bailey plays off him, or Diaby plays off him. But as an out-and-out striker, he's the main man. So who do you sign that knows they're not going to play? They're not going to displace Ollie Watkins out of the team. Likewise, Spurs were never going to sign somebody to displace Harry Kane out of their team. He was always going to play. You'd think John Duran is kind of like the perfect player, someone who is raw and unrefined and young and happy to be the backup. But he seems unhappy to be the backup, which is fine. That's what some players are going to be like. If he feels like he has to go out and play to improve, Absolutely. I kind of applaud him for that.
Yeah, fair enough.
The flip side of that is, do you get an experienced striker who is happy to come to the back end of their career and sit on the bench a little bit? It's a very difficult situation Villa find themselves in, and I'm not quite sure what the answer is really.
Yeah, it is. It is a challenging situation, and as I say, like with Ollie Watkins, it's like he's so perfect for how we play. It's just like you're just not going to start ahead of him. And as I say, maybe Duran does need like 6 Premier League games in a row, and maybe he starts finding goals. Maybe he starts to reach his peak, and maybe that's what he feels as well. And if that's the decision he's made, then all right, fair enough. You can't argue with that. But and I wish him luck if that's what he wants to do. But at the same time, I don't know. I just feel like Villa's a good opportunity, and one that I think it's a good role for him at the moment to just be that backup to Watkins and learn from great coaches we have at Villa, and it's somewhere that he could reach his full potential eventually.
Yeah, it's an interesting one with Duran, and we'll obviously see what happens with him in the coming weeks. I mean, with all kind of pre-match noise of Instagram stuff and AC, I was like, he's starting the game now. Like, he's not like edging closer to a move or whatever kind of cliche you want to throw at it. He's not on the verge of completing a move to Milan, because he's here now playing in Middlesbrough. So yeah, we'll see what happens over the next couple of weeks. If he goes out, he goes out. But I would expect it. Obviously, I don't know, but I would expect that to be a loan rather than a permanent sale. But who knows? Football changes very quickly. We're going to wrap up there tonight, Frankie. We've done 30-odd minutes. So thank you for everyone joining us live this evening. If you're watching this on catch up, get involved in the comment section on YouTube and have your say on the things we've chatted through this evening. You can also leave us iTunes reviews on Apple Podcasts and a 5-star rating on Spotify if you'd be so kind. Frankie, I've done this in the last couple of episodes, a bit of a challenge almost, I suppose, for want of a better word, to let the guest do the outro and say goodbye for us. So I'll give it over to you to say thank you for watching and a good night.
Thank you for watching the Claret and Blue podcast. Dan Rolinson is a super presenter. Thanks for having me on. I'm Frankie from All Villa No Filler. Thank you so much. Up the mighty Villa.